He always said the same thing before a fire mission. I trust the ground more than the tables. The officers laughed, right up until the morning the war turned all their instruments into useless metal. No radar, no drones, no working optics, just a blind battery in a drowned valley and a single school notebook, swollen with damp and packed with numbers that existed nowhere in the manuals. Headquarters' order was simple and suicidal. Destroy an enemy artillery group hidden in an industrial zone across the river, under heavy fog with minimal shells and no time to adjust. If the official firing tables were wrong, they would miss. If the senior sergeant's private scribbles were wrong, they would kill their own. One mistake, and his homemade corrections would turn from a joke into a war crime written in blood instead of ink. Dawn doesn't rise over this position, it leaks in, a dirty gray light seeping into a landscape that looks permanently bruised. They call this a quiet sector. The men who live here know that quiet on an artillery line is just the silence between someone's miscalculation and someone else's funeral. The battery sits in a crooked horseshoe along the slope of a low, chewed-up hill. Gun pits reinforced with rotten planks, sandbags that have soaked through so many times they look like wet stone, mud that remembers every boot that ever stepped into it. Among all this, one man doesn't quite fit. Senior Sergeant Artyom Larin. Not because he looks special. He doesn't. His greatcoat is patched, his boots are scuffed, his hands are chapped and blackened like everyone else's. He stands out because of the thing he carries, not a medal, not a trophy. A thick school notebook with a soft, battered cover, swollen from damp, edges rounded and dark with fingerprints. The writer, the men call him. At first it was a joke. Now it's a habit they can't shake. While others smoke between missions, Larin writes. While they argue about rumors, he writes. While the echoes of their last salvo are still rolling back from the far woods, he leans against the shield of his gun and writes. Tiny, tight handwriting crawls across every page. Temperature, wind, cloud cover, how quickly the sound of the blast comes back when the air's dry. How the echo lags when the soil is wet. How much wider the shell pattern gets when the wind comes down the valley instead of across it. What happens to the burst when the target sits just behind a low rise or inside a shallow hollow? He has symbols for things no manual bothers to name. The way fog eats sound, the way a bare hillside throws it back, how a thin belt of forest can make a hit feel further than it is. None of this is official. No one ordered him to do it. There is no column in the daily report that says, Sergeant's personal observations, and that is why it makes officers nervous. Larin, writing your memoirs again? The voice comes from behind, level and dry. Captain Kovalenko, commander of the battery, steps down into the gun pit. His boots sink in with a wet crack, splashing mud onto the metal shield. He carries his map case under one arm. The other hand holds a cigarette burned almost to the filter. The men nearby smirk automatically. Careful, comrade captain, one of them says. If you distract him, he'll lose the plot. A line of low laughter. It doesn't reach Larin's face. He closes the notebook halfway, thumb marking the place, and turns. No plot, comrade captain, he says. Just corrections. Kovalenko lifts an eyebrow. Corrections to what? To the firing tables? To the laws of ballistics? Corrections to this valley, Larin answers simply. The tables don't know it. I do. There it is. The friction point. On paper, the system doesn't need his knowledge of this valley. It needs obedience to numbers, not loyalty to terrain. Guns are meant to be interchangeable, positions temporary, men replaceable. But war doesn't live on paper. This valley bends sound in strange ways. Fog falls here differently than 10 kilometers to the west. Shell splinters travel further on frozen ground than in soft mud. Larin learned that the hard way. Months ago, a different ridge, a different morning. They had a simple mission, short barrage over a tree line, smash suspected enemy assembly trenches. Textbook work, clean angles, clean distances, all by the book. The young fire control officer, fresh face, fresh boots, fresh out of school, trusted his instruments like scripture. The rangefinder gave a number, the tables gave an elevation, the map showed neat lines and tidy contours. Larin, standing at his gun, looked past the map and saw the land itself, a slight dip before the trees, soil dark and heavy from weeks of patchy rain. He knew what that meant. He'd written it down a dozen times in that same notebook. Shells landing over a soft dip tended to walk longer. Bursts appeared just a little further than the theory promised. "Comrade Lieutenant," he said carefully, "last time we fired over ground like that, the pattern stretched. We might—" "Sergeant?" The lieutenant didn't raise his voice, but he didn't let Laren finish either. "We have tables for this. Do your part, we will do ours." So Laren did his part. He loaded the shells. He gave commands. His crew slammed steel into the breach with practiced rhythm. The valley erupted. The tree line vanished in smoke and splinters. From behind the guns, it looked perfect. A tight wall of explosions, right where the markers on the map said the enemy should be. The men shouted, exhilarated. Someone clapped the young lieutenant on the back. Then, seconds later, the wrong echoes came home. Not the distant heavy thud of shells chewing enemy trenches. Closer, sharper, like the blast was bouncing back from somewhere it had no right to touch. When the wind pushed the smoke aside, they saw what the map hadn't shown clearly enough. A forward observation post, their own, dug in closer than headquarters realized. A shallow scrape in the earth, half collapsed. Bits of camouflage netting hanging in tatters, a piece of field telephone wire looping out of the dirt like a dead snake. The official report wrote it off as enemy activity disrupted by our fire. On paper, the battery was clean. The survivor who lived long enough to be pulled out did not sound like a satisfied customer. "You were ours," he rasped, coughing mud. "I heard your guns before theirs." The words stuck. Laren heard them again that night, and the next, and the next. He filled pages. Not with guilt. Guilt could not reverse a shell in flight. With data. If no one else would write down how this land lied, he would. He stopped trusting standard conditions. He stopped believing that one valley was just another grid square. Now, back in the present, Captain Kovalenko flips the notebook open with his thumb, scanning the compact writing. Lines of dates, temperatures, wind directions, cryptic marks in the margins, a small triangle, a circle with a slash, a single underlined word. Hollow, fog, delay. "You actually use this?" Kovalenko asks, not quite mocking, not quite respectful. "I already did," Laren says. "Every time the tables were close but not close enough." "The tables are written by people a lot smarter than either of us," the captain replies. "Academy professors, engineers. None of them have stood in this pit when the fog drops," Laren says. "None of them heard the echo hit that hill 1.5 seconds later when the soil was wet instead of frozen." Kovalenko snorts. "You're a good gunner, Laren. Don't ruin it by turning into a theorist." He snaps the notebook shut and hands it back. "Just don't let your creativity interfere with orders. This isn't your personal war." But to Laren, it feels exactly like that. He slips the notebook inside his coat, close to his chest, where the paper rests over bone. Every page is a quiet act of rebellion against the idea that war is a clean equation. He steps up onto the firing step and looks out over the valley. Gray sky pressed low, fog forming in the hollows, the far tree line a washed-out smear, neither near nor far. He can feel it in the air, like a pressure building behind his eyes. Today won't be standard conditions. From below, boots hammer up the slope. A runner appears, breath ragged, a folded sheet clamped in his fist. "Urgent from division, Comrade Captain." Kovalenko takes the paper, unfolds it, reads once. The cigarette in his hand burns down, forgotten. He doesn't shout the order. He doesn't swear. He just looks up at the sky, then across the valley, then at Laren. "Battery command dugout," he says. "All key staff, maps, data, move." Then, after a heartbeat, "Laren, bring your notebook." This time, nobody laughs. Gunners glance at each other. Drivers pause with oily rags in their hands. Even the cynical ones understand. If the captain is dragging a sergeant's school notebook into the command dugout, something is very wrong with the picture on the map. Laren pulls the notebook out again, thumb brushing a smear of dried mud off the cover. Up there, on the far side of the fog-choked river, enemy guns are being rolled into position. Men he has never seen are preparing to kill men he knows by name. Headquarters has just drawn a line on paper and called it a fire mission. But this valley doesn't care about their lines. He tucks the notebook under his arm and follows the captain down into the earth, towards a table where official doctrine, Broken instruments and one stubborn sergeant's handwritten war are about to collide. The map on the table looks like a lie. Clean lines, sharp symbols, a calm blue river drawn in a neat curve with little squares and circles marking factories, warehouses, rail spurs. If you didn't know better, you'd think this was a plan for building something, not for tearing it apart. In reality, above their heads, water drips steadily from the ceiling of the dugout. The kerosene lamp swings slightly from a nail, shadows crawling over the faces of the men hunched around the table. Captain Kovalenko, Fire Control Officer Lieutenant Sokol, Topographer, Radio Operator, and, slightly out of place among the officers, Senior Sergeant Artyom Larin with his school notebook clamped under his arm. The captain lays the order from division in the center of the map like a knife. Short version, he says. Enemy artillery group, estimated up to a battalion of guns, is deploying here. His knuckle taps a gray block of buildings on the far bank. Old industrial zone, brick plant, warehouses, fuel storage. They're setting up behind it. Behind, not inside? The topographer asks. Per radio intercept, they're using the buildings as cover, Sokol answers. His voice is clipped, tired. Guns and ammo packed tight between structures, trucks under roofs. They think the walls will save them. The radio operator, his fingers still stained with pencil graphite from copying the message, clears his throat. Division says if they finish setting up, they'll start systematic counter-battery, he says. First us, then the neighbors, then the bridges. We'll be blind and they'll be hunting. Kovalenko nods once. Timing? Interception suggests they're finishing deployment now, calibrating, assigning sectors, Sokol says. We have a window, maybe half an hour, before they start their own fire mission. Visibility. The topographer doesn't answer with words. He just reaches up and taps the damp ceiling. Fog, low clouds, no line of sight. On the map, the distance across the river is a simple number. Out there, it's a gray void. Rangefinder is useless beyond the far bank in this soup, Sokol continues. We'll get a number, but it'll be garbage. No spotters either. Forward observers can't see the targets. They can only hear them. So we have an enemy we can't see, instruments that can't see, and a higher command that wants precision with minimal ammunition, Kovalenko sums up. Perfect. He doesn't raise his voice. That makes it worse. Tired eyes move around the table, looking for something that isn't there. Then, almost reluctantly, they settle on the only different object in the dugout, the fat, battered notebook in Larin's hands. Kovalenko notices the looks. His mouth tightens. Let's start like adults, he says. Sokol, give me the official solution. Then we'll talk about improvisation. The lieutenant straightens, pulls a notebook of his own from the map case. Thin, neat government issue. We have approximate coordinates from previous aerial photos, he says. We know the general layout of the industrial zone, range, this band here. His pencil draws a narrow shaded arc beyond the river. We apply corrections for standard fog conditions, seasonal temperature, average humidity for this region, fire and bracketing, walk the bursts in. How many rounds to walk the bursts in this weather? The captain asks. Sokol hesitates. Depends on how wrong the first bracket is. Guess? 2 or 3 salvos per gun before we're confident. That's assuming they stand still, the topographer adds quietly. Once the first shells land, they'll start repositioning. Trucks, ammo, maybe even the guns themselves. You'll be chasing ghosts in a fog. And in those 2 or 3 salvos, Kovalenko says, every listening post on their side will know exactly where our battery is. Counter-battery radars or not, they'll have sound ranging. They'll start working us over, and we'll still be walking bursts. Silence. On paper, the official solution is correct. On the ground, it's suicide stretched over 5 minutes. Larin shifts his weight slightly. The paper against his ribs feels heavier than his sidearm. Kovalenko notices. All right, the captain says, exhaling smoke toward the door. Now the part I'm going to regret. Larin, put your fairy tales on the table. The sergeant steps closer, lays the school notebook down beside the official map. It looks wrong there, like a child's exercise book dropped onto a general staff plan. He opens it without ceremony, no preface, no apology. Pages of cramped handwriting, dates and numbers, arrows and strange marks, little blocks of text in the margins. Fog, valley full, echo delayed X 1.7. Wet forest absorbs high frequencies, bursts sound further. Shells over saturated soil sink deeper, less lateral fragmentation. Sokol frowns, leaning in despite himself. You've been measuring echo delay? He asks. Laren nods. When we fired at this sector, he says, touching a grid square on the map, in snow, in rain, in dry cold, I logged how long it took for echoes to come back from the far bank, from the hills, from the factory wall when we tested range on it last month. You tested the wall? The topographer asks sharply. Kovalenko ordered a short registration on a dead building 3 weeks ago, Laren explains. 3 guns, 3 shells. Officially, it was to verify the previous map corrections. Unofficially, he taps a note in the margin. Brick wall, hollow interior, mixed echo. Sokol's eyes narrow. He remembers the mission now. It had felt like a formality. At the time, Laren continues, I noted something you didn't put in the report. The echo from the wall was dirty. Not one clean slap, but a double. First from the exterior, then from inside. So? Sokol's tone is cautious now. So that tells you the space inside the buildings is big and empty, Laren says. Good for hiding trucks and guns. Bad for them if we make it collapse. He turns a few pages, fingers moving with the speed of someone who has lived in these lines for months. You already have your theoretical distance to the zone, he says. I can't beat your tables on that. But your corrections are based on average valley fog, average humidity. He taps another line. Current conditions heavier than last record, temp closer to 0, wind from southeast, low. How do you know? Sokol asks, almost defensive. Because I was on the gun line at 4 in the morning, Laren says. I listened. The sound of our own test shots last week died faster. Today, it crawls. And the fog filled the hollows earlier than usual. I've seen this pattern 3 times this winter. Each time, the tables said one thing. Reality gave us overshoot on hard ground and undershoot in soft. He runs his finger across 3 separate dates, linked by a thin pencil line. The echo delay from the far bank on days like this is about, he glances at a scribble, 1.5 times the standard we use. That's not magic. It's water in the air, soil saturation, temperature, same valley, same river, same tricks. Kovalenko interlaces his fingers. Bottom line, Sergeant. Bottom line, if you use standard fog corrections, your first bracket will be long, Laren says. You'll hit beyond the industrial zone or just clip the far edge. They'll know you're reaching for them, and they'll move. And you, Sokol says slowly, propose what? Guessing? Laren shakes his head. Not guessing. We have 3 reference shots on the factory wall in dry weather. We have my records from 3 fog days with similar wind and temperature. We take the known distance, compare echo delays, apply the ratio, and adjust your base range down by that factor for the first salvo. Not walk in, start closer. Sokol stares at him. That's extremely approximate, he says at last. So is pretending today's valley is the same as the one in your academy handbook, Laren replies. His voice is still calm. The question isn't whether we trust perfect data. We don't have perfect data. The question is which imperfection kills fewer of ours. The words hang heavy in the stale air. Kovalenko looks from his lieutenant to his sergeant. This isn't just range, the topographer cuts in. Direction matters too. If the fog is thick enough, refraction can bend sound. Your echo might not come straight back. Laren nods. I know, that's why I marked this, he says, pointing to a cluster of notes. On days with wind like today, the echo from the left hill arrives slightly earlier than from the right, even though the distances are the same on the map. The sound is being pushed sideways. If we ignore that, we'll be lining up on a phantom center. If we correct for it, his pencil slides along the map, just a hair. We aim where the real center is, not where the instruments think it should be. You're asking us, Sokol says slowly, to rotate the fire plan, compress the range, and trust that your listening exercises are more reliable than calibrated optics. I'm asking you to acknowledge that your optics are blind right now, Laren says. Mine aren't perfect, but they're open. The captain snuffs his cigarette in a cracked porcelain dish. Let's put the pride aside for a moment, Kovalenko says. Sokol, how far off do you think his numbers could be? The lieutenant hesitates, eyes flicking between the official tables and Laren's cramped notes. If his recorded echo delays are accurate and his comparisons honest, he trails off, then starts again. Range error could still be 20, 30 meters, maybe more. Is that acceptable? The captain asks. Against a spread of guns and trucks packed into yards and alleys? Yes, the topographer answers before Sokol can. We don't need to hit a single gun. We need to smash the cluster, trigger secondary detonations. 30 meters inside or outside, the ideal is still in the kill box. And direction? Kovalenko presses. Worse, Sokol admits. If his wind-based azimuth correction is wrong, we could shift the pattern sideways too much. We might hit civilian structures beyond the target area, or worse, miss the main ammo stack. Civilian structures? The captain's gaze hardens. That industrial zone has been stripped for years. The only things living in those buildings now are rats and explosives. He leans back. Here's our situation, he says. Official solution means 2-3 salvos of adjustment. During that time, the enemy finishes deploying, begins counter-battery, and starts zeroing in on our exact position while we are still feeling for them in the dark. He glances at the paper in front of him, at the line where division insists on minimal ammunition expenditure, priority target. Unofficial solution means, he continues, we compress adjustment into the first salvo. We fire closer than the tables say, in a pattern designed for maximum chance of touching their ammo. If Laren is wrong, we'll see it in the sound, and the second salvo will correct, if we're still alive to fire it. If he's very wrong, Sokol says quietly, we could waste the only shells we have and hand them the initiative. Laren breaks his silence. Comrade Captain, he says, I'm not asking you to choose between my notebook and the tables. We can use both. Use your calculations for base data. Use my notes to bias them. A small shift. Not a leap of faith. A nudge. He looks directly at Sokol. And I'm not hiding behind this, he adds, tapping the school cover. If you say no, I'll still load and fire like always. But you called me here. You told me to bring this. That means you already know the tables aren't enough today. The dugout feels smaller. It's not just about math, it's about blame. If they trust the manual and fail, it will be unfortunate conditions. If they trust the sergeant and fail, it will be unauthorized deviation from procedure. One keeps you in the system, the other can end your career or your freedom if anyone survives to write the report. Kovalenko knows it. Laren knows it. Even Sokol, who hides behind formulas, knows it. The captain's jaw works once, twice. Division wants effect on the first or second salvo, he says. They don't care how we get it. If we miss, they'll care very much. He taps Laren's notebook. If we do this your way and it works, this never leaves this dugout, he says. Your corrections will be written up as local conditions discovered during routine firing. He turns to Sokol. You will sign that report, Lieutenant, he says, as if it was your idea. Sokol flushes, not sure if this is an insult or a strange act of protection. And if it doesn't work, he asks. Kovalenko's eyes are cold. If it doesn't work, none of us will be giving explanations. For a moment, the only sound is the slow drip of water. Then the captain picks up a pencil. Range, he says. Sokol recites the official number. Now the adjustment factor from our local conditions specialist, Kovalenko adds, nodding at Lorene. Lorene rattles off a correction. Minus a certain percentage on range, minor rotation on azimuth to account for sound drift in fog-heavy southeast wind. Numbers hit the paper, lines shift by millimeters that mean dozens of meters out there in the gray. They sketch a fire plan built around shock, not caution. First salvo, a tight ladder of rounds walking through the center of the industrial zone, slightly closer than doctrine would place them. Mix of high explosive and a few incendiaries aimed at roofs and courtyards where trucks and stacks of crates might be hiding. Second salvo, wider spread, shifted deeper, ready to exploit any secondary explosions. If the first volley touches ammo, the second will feed the fire. Third salvo, only if necessary. There may not be time for it. Minimal ammunition, maximum chaos, the topographer mutters. If this lands where you think. If it doesn't, Sokol says, we will hear the silence. Kovalenko folds the paper, tucks it into his map case. Decision is made, he says. We're not dying by the book today. We're betting on the ground. He looks at Laren. You wanted this valley to mean something more than numbers, he says. Now it does. Get back to your gun. From this moment, those scribbles of yours are the spine of the fire mission. Laren picks up his school notebook. He expected relief. Instead, he feels something heavier, a cold, precise weight just below his collarbone. All those quiet hours of listening to echoes, measuring delays with a battered wristwatch, noting how damp wood changed the sound of a blast, none of it cost anything until now. Now, men will live or die on the strength of his private war against average conditions. He closes the notebook gently, as if afraid of tearing the paper. Outside, the fog is thicker. The valley is a bowl of milk, the far bank gone, the river hidden. Voices carry strangely. Boots sound duller on the boards. The world is already obeying the rules he wrote down in pencil. On the slope above the dugout, gunners move around their pieces, shapes in the murk, checking elevation gears, wiping optics that show nothing but gray. Someone spots Laren coming and calls out, "Hey, writer, did they finally promote your notebook to general?" Usually that would spark laughter. Today, it doesn't. They see the look on his face, the way he holds the notebook, not like a joke, but like a loaded weapon. He steps up to his gun, runs a hand along the cold steel of the barrel. The metal is familiar, predictable, honest in its brutality. If you tell it where to send the shell, it will do exactly that. For the first time, the question isn't whether the gun will obey. It's whether he deserves that obedience. From the command post, a phone rings, sharp and urgent. The fire mission is about to begin. Fog eats distance. From the gun line, the world ends 20, maybe 30 meters out. Beyond that, everything is just tone. The muffled thud of boots, the low murmur of voices, the distant, steady hiss of the river hidden somewhere in the white. The phone on the post barks once, then twice, sharper. "Battery, stand by." Voices fall to a low automatic silence. Metal clinks stop mid-motion. Men who have done this 100 times suddenly feel every buckle and strap on their bodies. At Laren's gun, the crew looks to him, not to the sky. He doesn't look like a man about to do something heroic. He looks like a man about to solve an equation he wrote himself. "Load," he says. The first round, high explosive with a fuse set shallow, slides into the breech. Steel on steel, the sound dampened by the heavy air. He touches the elevation wheel, not trusting only the marks. He checks the traverse, he checks again. The numbers match the plan. He still doesn't trust them. He reaches into his coat, fingers finding the soft, swollen cover of the school notebook. He doesn't open it, he doesn't need to. The pages live in his head now. Range compressed, azimuth nudged, pattern tightened, then stretched. If he is wrong, the first salvo will walk into emptiness. Or worse. The phone crackles. "Battery." The captain's voice comes through, flat, controlled. "Fire mission, industrial zone, package 1, on my command. Do not adjust until ordered. We listen first." Laren feels the crew stiffen. No one likes "we listen first." It means they are not in control yet. It means the first step is pure faith. He sets his jaw. "Ready," he says, more for his men than for the phone. The command cuts through the fog like a knife. "Battery, fire!" The valley jumps. Recoil hammers into his chest through the shield. The gun coughs flame and smoke, then snaps back on its rails. The ground under his boots shudders. 6, 7, 8 guns speak almost as one, their separate voices merging into a single brutal chord. For a fraction of a second, the fog glows orange around the muzzles. Then the light is gone, and the white swallows everything again. The shells are already in the air, invisible, committed. Now there's nothing left to do but listen. The world narrows to seconds. Sound travels, slow and sure, over the river, across whoever stands on the far bank. Men grip whatever is nearest, steel, wood, their own sleeves. Then, from somewhere beyond the white wall, the answer comes. Not one answer. Many. A chain of blunt, heavy reports overlapping, chewing into masonry and concrete. There's a different note under them, something flatter, more brittle, the sound of structures failing, not just ground excavated. Laren's crew looks at him. "Well?" someone whispers. He doesn't reply. He is counting. 1, 2, 3. Delay. Echo. The echo that comes back is wrong in exactly the right way. It's dirty. Layered, not a simple slap of sound off a hillside, but a rolling, crashing mixture of first impact, then secondary shudder, then the hollow roar of something collapsing into an interior space. He knows that sound. He logged it from the test shots on the dead factory wall. This is louder, bigger, angrier. He grabs the phone. "Battery, this is 2, he says, voice suddenly hard. "Impacts inside zone, multiple rebounds, structural failure, not overshoot. Recommend second package deeper, slightly right. Something big is going." There's a pause at the other end. Not long. Just enough to picture the captain in the dugout, weighing trust against time. "Package 2, Kovalenko answers. "Use your correction. Fire." This time there is no hesitation. "Load. He and incendiary, as per list. Elevation plus?" Laren rattles the adjustment. "Traverse right, 1 minor." Hands move. Shells slam home. Breaches close. The second volley leaves the guns with a kind of savage relief, like a held breath finally let out. Again, the valley flashes and kicks. Again, the fog swallows the light. And again, a few heartbeats later, the far side answers. The first blast is wrong. Not wrong like a miss. Wrong like more. A crack that becomes a roar, that becomes a rolling thunder that does not end. One explosion feeding another, and another, and another. A chain reaction tearing through something that does not want to burn but has no choice. Ammo. Laren feels the hairs on his neck lift. The air itself seems to flinch. Even here, on their side of the river, the shockwave has teeth. It pushes into the fog, turns it into a gray muscle that flexes and relaxes. Men duck instinctively, though they're far from the actual blast. Then comes a higher, more vicious chorus, shells cooking off in their racks, rockets and charges igniting without aim, tearing apart the very guns they were meant to feed. Someone on the line laughs once, sharp and disbelieving. "Holy!" "Shut up," Laren snaps. "Listen." Under the chaos, under the big detonations, there is space. No clean, disciplined return fire, no measured counter battery. The enemy position is not shooting. It is dying. The phone crackles again, this time with more voices behind the captain, radio chatter, fragments of messages. "Per intercept," Kovalenko says, barely keeping satisfaction out of his tone. "Hostile battery reports ammo dump hit, multiple guns lost, general withdrawal. They're screaming for trucks that no longer exist." One of Laren's crew lets out a low whistle. "So the notebook wasn't lying," he mutters. Laren doesn't smile. "Third package?" he asks into the phone. "Negative," comes the answer. "You did your job. Division wants you alive for the next one. Hold fire, conserve shells, let them burn." He hangs up without ceremony. Around them, the fog pulses faintly orange, then red, then a darker, dirtier color as smoke from the far bank muscles its way into the low clouds. For the first time that morning, someone on the gun line breathes out like they have been holding it for an hour. The jokes creep back, cautious, like animals testing a new clearing. "Write that down, writer," one gunner says. "That page is going to be your masterpiece." Laren looks at the notebook in his hand. The temptation is strong, to flip it open right here, scribble in big letters. "Confirmed. Echo-based correction in heavy fog can destroy a hidden battery before it fires." Instead, he runs his thumb along the spine. "There's time," he says. "The valley isn't going anywhere." But he knows that isn't entirely true. Nothing about this war is permanent. Not positions, not units, not lives, not even mistakes. Hours later, when the fog finally thins, the far bank comes into view in broken pieces. Through binoculars passed from hand to hand, the industrial zone looks like a wound. Roofs peeled back, walls collapsed inward. A yard where trucks once stood, now a black pit of twisted frames. No ordered gun line, no clean positions, just wreckage. Someone whistles again, softer this time. "Looks like we dropped a hammer on a box of matches," a gunner says. "Looks like the matches were aimed at us," another replies. The official verdict arrives in the afternoon, carried on another folded piece of paper from Division. Commendations for the battery. Note of effective use of limited ammunition under difficult meteorological conditions. Praise for flexible application of firing tables and local terrain knowledge. Laren's name is there, buried in the middle. Senior Sergeant A. Lorin, recommended for instructor duties with emphasis on collecting and systematizing frontline firing experience for educational purposes. He reads the line twice. Instructor. They want to take his notebook, his messy personal war against average, and turn it into something clean. A pamphlet, a lecture, a set of bullet points. "Looks like you're going to school, writer," one of the men grins. "This time as a teacher." Kovalenko finds him leaning against the gun shield, the commendation paper folded in his hand. "You earned it," the captain says. "They need what's in your head." "They'll need the valley too," Laren answers. "It doesn't fit on a blackboard." Kovalenko snorts. "Don't get romantic. They'll want numbers, not poetry. You can give them that." He taps the breast of Laren's coat where the notebook lives. "Up there," he jerks his chin in the vague direction of the rear. "Men who have never seen fog like this will stand over maps and talk about local conditions like they invented the term. Better they have your scribbles than nothing." Laren looks at the paper again. Instructor, rear, classrooms, away from the guns that actually listen when he talks. "You could refuse," Kovalenko says quietly. "Stay on the line. Keep doing what you do. Nobody can force you to leave mid-campaign, not without a fight." He says it like a dare. Laren thinks of the forward post that died because a young lieutenant trusted tables more than ground. He thinks of the echo this morning, dirty, layered, exactly as his notes predicted. He thinks of the men on the other side of the river who never got to fire the guns they had carefully set up behind brick and steel. He knows something now that he didn't before. His notebook is dangerous. In the right hands, it can shorten battles. In the wrong hands, it can be ignored as unofficial until someone else buries their own post. "Send copies," Laren says at last, "not the original." Kovalenko studies him. "Paranoid?" "Careful," Laren corrects. "This stays with the gun until the war is done. I'll write out what they need, clean enough for their tables. But I'm not giving them the only map I trust." The captain actually smiles. "For a man who writes everything down, you're very bad at letting go of paper," he says. Laren shrugs. "Paper remembers," he says. "People don't." That night, in the dim light of a single candle stub, he finally opens the notebook again. The last pages are crowded. There's barely room for more. He finds a corner and writes smaller than usual. "Today, heavy fog, southeast wind, temperature near 0. Echo corrections applied to division target. Result, ammo dump and guns destroyed before first hostile salvo. Personal note, tables can be persuaded, terrain cannot." He stops. The pencil hovers. On the next line, almost as an afterthought, he adds, "Cost if wrong, our own lives." The candle gutters. Outside, the guns sleep, their barrels dark against the faint glow of distant dying fires on the far bank. Tomorrow there will be another mission, another set of numbers, another argument between what the book says and what the ground insists on. Somewhere far from the front, men in clean uniforms will read his cleaned-up report and nod over phrases like adaptive correction and field observation. They will never smell the fog. They will never hear the echo hesitate before coming home. But in this dugout, on this hill, in this valley, there is a school notebook that refuses to forget. For now, that is enough. The war is not over. The tables are still on the table. The ground is still under his boots. And as long as artillery is told to hit targets it cannot see, there will be at least one man who trusts the echo of reality more than the comfort of perfect numbers.